Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Living Your Greatness. This is your host, Ben Mummy, and today I am joined by Rick Shaver. So for those of you that don't know Rick, he is a Canadian marketer, entrepreneur, traveler, as well as runner. Rick has worked at Labatt Breweries for 10 years before becoming CEO and co-founder at the Hive INC, one of the top 10 marketing agencies in Canada. The agency has worked with well-known brands such as Coca-Cola, Heineken, and Jack Daniels. So Rick, welcome to the show. It is a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you, Ben. It's a pleasure to be here and look forward to having a good chat.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm also super excited. Something that I want to share with my listeners right now is Rick is also my uncle. So I'm really excited. I was telling this to him a couple weeks ago that he's always been someone that I've looked up to in a lot of areas in terms of entrepreneurship, also fatherhood as well, in terms of how involved he is with his family. So I'm super excited to chat with you today. It's going to be a lot of fun. And let's kind of get kicking here. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you spend your formative years growing up? And what inspired you to become a marketer and then help co-fund the Hive?
Well, first of all, I'm a proud uncle too. So Ben, it's great to be here and great to be on a legendary show like you've created here. So very well done. I grew up in West Island, Montreal, back kind of 60s, 70s, sort of those idealistic kind of baby boom upbringing days. Herds of kids, busy families, sports for me was kind of central to everything. But to your second question, Ben, I probably couldn't spell marketing back then, even in high school. I couldn't spell a lot of things in high school, but I did have a bit of an ambition to somehow, have sport and business sort of come together. And the thing that I was quite interested in at the time was potentially being an athletic director at a university. I thought that might be a sweet spot because I did go to 2 universities and a couple of degrees and that kind of stuff. But after I did my master's degree at the University of Alberta, I did get some exposure to practical marketing versus theoretical and coursework. And that was at the World University Games Corporation, where I really got into sort of the promotion side, the building a brand. The World University Games was not a known entity in North America and was really something that was sort of European based. So it was a marketing challenge, but I didn't really get into the real marketing fundamentals and theoretical side until I was at Labatt Breweries of Canada. And that's where I really learned about marketing. That was a finishing school at the time in the 90s. Everybody aspired to work at Labatt in marketing, mostly because we had big budgets. It was very competitive, 3 big breweries fighting for market share. So we were doing bold and daring, it was a lot of rock solid strategic work to get to the sort of the tactics that we ended up putting out into the marketplace. So it was baptism by fire. So that was really where I developed my passion for marketing.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, no, it was really cool to hear about your story there, even, of touching base on athletics, because I know that's been a big part of your life. And we'll kind of dive into that later, about that athlete mindset and then how, transferred, in terms of going the sport management route, being open to the games there, getting that marketing experience and then, making that transition to Labatt that then eventually led to where you are today, and so something that I kind of want to move to, it's pretty cool. I mentioned in the introduction that the Hive has done a lot of really cool work, and they've worked with some pretty impressive brands, like Coca-Cola, Heineken, and Jack Daniels. And I know I saw recently, even on LinkedIn, that you even had that big celebration, I believe it was with Jack Daniels. And so a question I have for you is, how do you maintain, a strong and long-lasting relationship, with clients?
It's interesting, Ben, because I find sort of professional and personal life and the values that go along with it tend to intersect. Often they tend to be the same. So life gets a little simpler if you want it to be. On the business side and on life, I really think people in the business world and even friendships on the personal side, they want to work with people that they like, people that they trust, and most important, people that deliver. So as business partners, if you've got that kind of pledge to each other and you continue to deliver on that pledge, it's going to make for a really, really great partnership. And that, as you say, was, recently with an unprecedented partnership with Brown-Forman, the parent company of Jack Daniel's. Just wonderful people that we've worked with for many years and done some really fine work together. It was exciting. Coca-Cola, as well, and we've had Miller Brewing Company, which is now it's rolled up into ABI, the biggest brewer in the world. But yeah, so really simple stuff, just people that you like, you trust, and that you deliver for.
That's awesome. And how do you is there an example? How do you build, if someone's tuning in right now and they're thinking, okay, yeah, but how do you build that trust? Besides just like the results, were there other things too, like personal touches that you kind of added to that as well? Are there any examples that you want to share?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, it's if you say you're going to do something for somebody, follow through and make it happen. And oftentimes people are either afraid to say, no, I can't get that done, or they say they're going to get it done and then they fall down on the job. So it's consistency in the relationship and being honest and forthright and where possible delivering on what you said you were going to do.
Okay, cool. And then, another question I have, like your team, right? Like this is a big team that you guys have. And, because you're an agency, right, that's doing marketing, there's a lot of skill sets of, creativity and innovation. So how does the Hive foster, creativity and innovation within its team? And what strategies have you found to be, effective in leading a successful agency?
So it's a great question, Ben. I really like that question. And again, if you look at people in an organization, they really want to feel like they're making a difference, which means if you can, where possible, let go and empower them to be up on the high wire, to do good things, and also not feel that they're afraid of failure. They can do good things and not be worried that they're going to be cut down. So empowerment is critical. On working with clients, we have even to this day at the Hive, we're all about collaboration. We want to be the greatest collaborating agency in the world for clients, and clients appreciate that, and they've got a lot to offer. So empowerment, collaboration, results driven, and that is critical, because a lot of the clients, most of the clients we've had over the years have been publicly traded companies. They're on the hook every quarter for results, and correspondingly, the people that are in the organization that are responsible for growing the business are also on the hook. So they want somebody that's results driven. And lastly, and this is a little self-serving, but it's really important to remember, because we've been doing this, I've been doing this for 28 years. You have to still focus on what I call the business of the business, which is, I always tell the clients at the right time, is that, by the way, we're a business too, so we're wrapped up, and every day we're paid to understand our clients' business, strategize in the business, create solutions for them. And then sometimes you can forget that we have paychecks to deliver to our people every 2 weeks too, and we have to be profitable if we're going to stay in business. So those would be some top of my head sort of thoughts on that, Ben.
Okay, great. And then, I have another question. Like I've seen, your past office, and you don't just have creative individuals, but in terms of the environment, right? It's a cool setup, right? And I'm thinking about like your last office that I saw, right? You had a Jack Daniel's room, and then you had this and that. And so that's also cool too, when you have new, clients coming in, to meet with you or come to your office. That also probably has like a creative or innovative feel, right? And kind of touch. So how important is that also as well in terms of for your environment, for your employees, but as well as for your clients?
Yeah, another good question, Ben. And I will say that, you know, there's such a wide range of companies. Our company, we don't make widgets. We don't have an assembly line that has to be sort of oiled or you know, parts changed, that kind of thing. Our company is 100% people. And we need to, just like a company that does produce widgets and has an assembly, you got to look after your machine. And our machine is people. And right since we started the company, way back in the day, that has been critical. And I do know that most people that have worked at the Hive over all of our time period, they look back on their career and their best days, their halcyon days in the agency business were with the Hive. And that's not me talking, that's employees. So
That's
that's
awesome.
critical.
That's awesome. I love that. And you know what? You know, you and I had a chat, you know, last month in Toronto, and you also said, you know, some of these employees, right? If they have gone on to other endeavors, it's really cool to see what they've done and where they've gone as well, right? So whether they've stayed within the team and moved up and done incredible work, or whether they've pursued other dreams or started their own passions. So it's really good to hear that, you know, that's super important. And something that I want to move to, you know, you've done a lot of cool projects, and I'm sure there's probably a massive list, but there's one that I remember that you used to tell me about was when Sid the Kid, aka Sidney Crosby, you know, one of the, you know, the world's top hockey players, when he was with, I believe it was Nike or Reebok, you guys had done a commercial with him, and it was a pretty exciting, you know, project. But my question to you is, you know, feel free to comment on that one, but what has been the most memorable project or campaign you've worked on with the Hive, and why?
Oh boy, there's so many. Sid was great. We worked with him on Reebok Hockey, and before that was it. We launched Reebok Hockey through Sid, and then did a lot of work with him, several campaigns over the years. But the one that really sticks out in my mind, just because it was we invented it, and it was part of a partnership, a 9-year partnership we had with Miller Genuine Draft. It's a big global brand. And we ended up being their agency of record for over 9 years. And one of the things we had to deal with was this brand was in a big brand in some markets, say in Japan at the time, even Guam at the time. It was a big brand in Russia, a big brand in South Africa. But we needed, as a global agency, we needed to somehow efficiently. First of all, we had to develop the positioning of the brand, which was essentially having it it became a contemporary brand, and we associated it with music, which it's, if you choose your music genres right, you can really make a statement for a brand. So we needed to provide evidence. We used contemporary music. We gave them a property, and the property was called the Miller Music Tour. So think of this as the ultimate club and concert tour. So it was a private 757 jet. It carried 300 people, 125 media, and 175 consumer winners from different countries, 40 people from 40 countries. And it would go from the first year, it went from New York City to Miami to LA with this ultimate club and concert tour. And it was also a hook for the local markets, you know, in advance of this tour, to sort of prize the tour and amplify the tour. And so people in markets knew nothing about Miller Genuine Draft, except it was associated with this ultimate club and concert tour. And the marketing activities they did and the activations they did, all the brand did was grow in all of these markets, which was phenomenal. Hence, it ran for 9 years, and we did all of the packaging. We did the fulfillment. We shot television, Master of the Supers, and we fulfilled the event, signing up, you know, the LL Cool J's, and we had tied them into all sorts of other really cool private concerts. And it went on for 9 years around the world, which was super cool. So I would say that would be the most exciting. It was scary to be kind of like, oh my God, I'm signing a contract here for a 757. But we did it, and again, it was all about the results, and we liked working with those guys, and they trusted us with big ideas, you know.
That's awesome. No, I really appreciate that story. That's so cool. And I feel like myself and my listeners will have to try and look it up and see if there's any footage on it or anything like that. But
Well, I'm sure there'll be tons of stuff.
I'd say, yeah. And that's super
Yeah.
cool too, because that's very, how do I say, you kind of mentioned too, right? You're taking on bigger risks, which could then bring, bigger rewards, right? But it's kind of scary, right? So
Yeah.
really, really cool to
Yeah.
hear about how much you guys thought outside the box there. And yeah, I really enjoyed that example. And that actually leads well, because I have another question, which is more, you know, you have your clients, you have a good relationship with them, they trust you. Okay, cool. But now, you're trying to do your best at understanding the consumers, right? And being innovative and adapting, and also everything's always changing, right? Evolving, right? So question
Yes.
I have for you is like, how do you stay innovative and adapt to, a constantly evolving landscape of marketing as well as advertising?
Yeah, and that can be a very big challenge in our business because things move like lightning. My approach has always been that it's at various points in our history, I've always sort of said, okay, what's the agency of the future going to look like 3 years from now, and how can we be the first ones to get there? And that continues to allow you to be compelling and relevant, place bets on things that you have to do to make sure that you're meeting your client needs, new client needs, and their needs are based on customer needs. So understanding the consumer, depending on the category, whether it's hockey or whether we do work for Metro stores, we do work for OLG, Ontario Lottery Corp. So it's understanding all those audiences, but doing it from an agency services perspective. And we've just done that recently. 2 years ago, we hired a new CEO, and we also at the same time hired a chief strategy officer. Since then, 2 years ago, we also realized it's super important to have data and analytics. So we're bringing in a data and analytics expert full time after using sort of services, more contractually, and we've upgraded our creative resources. And so you can never stand still in business, and especially in our business where the change is just is dramatic compared to a lot of other industries.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that answer. And another question I have, it's more related to, like the team, right? Because, in terms of your role, you're a CEO level individual, right? And so question I have is, how is your experience, from sports where, you were a high level football player and you understood the importance of teamwork, influence your approach to teamwork and collaboration in the workplace?
Yeah, interesting, Ben, because again, I operate with some, credos, some of them that, sometimes they don't change. Sometimes I go to new credos, but you have to have beliefs and you have to have some, values on how you approach things. But one of the things I'm convinced is that, most good things that happen in life are a result of hard work. And I'll use an illustration from the 2018 Boston Marathon, where that was the worst weather in 60 years. It was absolutely a nightmare. It was rain, it was wind, it was sleet, it was freezing cold weather. They had their highest dropout rate ever. It was just horrible. Epic though, like unbelievably epic. But that was really hard work to get to Boston and to run Boston. And I like to illustrate my point here on hard work. I remember being at the 25-mile mark, which is just by Fenway Stadium, just by heading into downtown Boston. And at the 25-mile mark, I'm just frozen to the bone, like just half delirious, but just hanging in there. And who's there waiting for me at the 25-mile mark with a big Canadian flag is my 3 daughters and my wife and my son-in-law and a couple of friends. And I thought, oh my God, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. Yet the reward here is phenomenal. Just to be with the people I care the most in the world about at the 25-mile mark of the Boston Marathon. So I've always sort of looked at that, and it's the same thing in business when we have scary times of new losing clients or not winning pitches, stuff. Hard work prevails.
Yeah, hard work is key. And also I think too, like that other aspect that you said, having a group of people that lift each other up, right? So in the marathon case,
Yeah.
right, having like your fam there. And I know that's cheesy, but it's so true, right? Is having that environment where people are aligned, people are driven, people are in it together, So I really, really appreciate that. And I think that that lesson there too could be applied to anyone that's listening, whether it's another CEO or whether it's a high level athlete or even a high level investor. It can really apply to that, right? You always have to do your own homework. You always have to put in the reps, right, to get where you're going. So I appreciate that. And Rick, like another question that I'm curious to ask is, you've kind of worked with a lot of different CEOs, right, from different companies, and I'm sure there's a lot of personality traits that you kind of see, a leader that's maybe more introverted or extroverted, or maybe even an ambivert where it's kind of both, right? Where they have that social side, but also introverted side. So my question to you is, what leadership qualities do you think are the most important, for running a successful business, and how can a CEO go from good to great?
Well, I think you have to be a good motivator. You have to get people jazzed up to do the work and be part of the team and over deliver. You have to be a good coach, which is kind of part of being a good motivator. And it's being able to bring out the best in people. And sometimes it's not pretty because you have to stretch people. But afterwards, because stretch is uncomfortable, stretch is I'm not sure I can do what you're asking me, but there is nothing more satisfying for someone to come out of a period where they did something that they never believed that was possible. So those are just some things that come to mind.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I'm happy that you answer that as well, because I think a big thing that sometimes people forget, whether it's, a CEO or whether it's, coach of a sports team, is they sometimes forget that simple thing of putting the person, before the athlete, or the person before the worker, right? And finding out their strengths or getting to know them, right? Those personal touches that sometimes we kind of skip, right? And so
Yeah.
I think that's like another one, that kind of connects to what you were talking about. And I've had other people on this podcast that have spoken about that. Clifford Berry, who was, a high level coach for Canada, and Coach Victor Davis, as well as his good friend Peter Hart, who started the program of like recognition, across the world, with all these businesses and CEOs. So yeah, no, I appreciate that answer. And I think those were a couple other things that I kind of wanted to add to the discussion. The next part here that I want to move to is, although you've done a lot of cool stuff, in your professional life, something that I find interesting about you is, you've applied this champion mindset, whether it is, in your family, whether it is in sports, whether it is in travel. The first one I want to move to is, in terms of athletics, right? We kind of spoke a little bit about before how, you played high level football, at college. I believe you won some championships. And then you've also been big in like the running world as well. So a question I have for you is, you've carried this champion mindset into running, and you've actually completed many marathons. Now, my question to you is, you've already spoken about one of them, which was the Boston one, but what life lessons have you learned from completing the World Marathon Majors? Because I know there's a bunch of them that you did, whether it was in Tokyo or whether it was in, Berlin. So I'm curious to ask, what were some life lessons that you've learned from doing these?
Yeah, I think if I go back to my before starting the agency into corporate life, one of the big buzzwords back in the 90s was sort of Beehags, which is like big, hairy, audacious goals. So I've always tried to have a few Beehags kicking around, and you know, so I've done a bunch of marathons, and why I'm doing marathons, because I'm like, I'm a former defensive end. I have no business doing this. I don't have a body for a marathon career, but I have chosen to do that. And you know, the World Marathon Majors is those are the biggest, most prestigious marathons in the world, and they have something called the 6-star medal. And simply, when I first saw this 6-star medal, I thought, I gotta have that. And I think at the time I had I'd done New York City, I'd done Chicago, I had done Berlin, and so I had to get into Boston. I had to qualify for Boston, which was really hard. I thought, okay, I'm going to go to Reykjavik, Iceland, and I'm going to get a coach, and I can do all this stuff so they can attack this BHAG of getting this 6-star medal. And I got to Boston, got to Tokyo, COVID hit, and finally got the damn London marathon done a year ago, October, and I got the medal. So that was just one of those things that, like, even with the Traveler Century Club, to get 100 countries, that started in 1992. It took me 18 years to get to, 2010 when I was able to get that 100th country. So I think if you tie it right back to business, which is why we're talking here, Ben, it's you got to have belief in yourself. You got to be able to persevere, and you got to have some grit,
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I love that. And I'm happy that you brought that up because, I think, I don't think goal setting is everything, but I definitely do think it plays a big role, and I think also too, on top of that, having values that are aligned. So obviously, you're someone that's health oriented, right? And you're goal driven, right? And so those are all things that connected to a lot of goals that you've set, whether it's been in travel or work, or even, we just kind of spoke about like your running career as well, right? And so, that makes me think now, if we look at travel, which is another passion of yours, you're part of the Century Club, which is crazy because that says, you've been to at least over 100 countries in the world. Like, wow. So question I have for you, it might not be easy because I'm sure you've been to some spots maybe twice, maybe some spots once, but what have been some of your favorite destinations that you have visited? And are there any memorable highlights or even stories of something really unexpected that you saw happen?
Yeah, yeah. Well, Ben, my standard answer to that is when people say, "What's your favorite country?" I always say the next one. It sort of be a little forward thinking. But actually, in a weird way, that the two destinations I would say that kind of bubble to the top are not even countries. The Galapagos Islands, yeah, they are a country. They're part of Ecuador. They're 1,000 kilometers off of the Guayaquil and the Ecuadorian coast. Magnificent. It's just a miracle that all of the currents of the Pacific end up there, and the creatures and critters are just mind-boggling. That's where Darwin did his thing, right? And the other one that's not a country is Antarctica, which was in 2018, and that was like going to another solar system, like completely bottom of the world. Like, are you kidding me? We're inside the Antarctic Circle for 10 days, seeing leopard seals, like being surrounded by thousands of penguins and icebergs as big as Manhattan skyscrapers, and last August in Greenland, kind of the same thing. So Greenland is part of Denmark, but not really. So I guess those would just be a few little, sort of locations. But if you want me to bore the crap out of you, you won't do it online.
Yeah. No,
Tell you some more adventures,
I love that. Yeah, no, I appreciate you for sharing a couple of those because again, too, I'm sure there's probably like a book filled of it, right? Journaling a lot of them out and also photos, right? To keep all those memories. But it was cool to hear a couple of them, right? Because it is pretty unique, and not everyone always makes the time to do it. And that's something that, I had this conversation with my father is something so unique about you is how you've been able to really share, this experience of pursuing your desires in travel and work and, as well as like family life, And so that's another question I kind of want to ask is, how do you have such good, family life, work and balance? How do you do that?
Well, for all the stuff you mentioned, Ben, I'm just still kind of pretending I know what I'm doing, right? So I don't have any magic bullet answers, but I think the good news is on the travel front is that as you know, our girls have traveled with us to a lot of places, and of course, your aunt, my wife Jane, she joined the Traveler Century Club in 2019. Her last country, the 100th country, was Colombia, and she's been to a bunch of places since then. A couple of weeks ago, we were in Morocco and Gibraltar, which was also fantastic, in Spain. But yeah, I think part of what you have to try and do is in life and is try and combine passions, so that you're killing two birds with one stone, or whatever the analogy might be, just to be able to, I like marathon running, I like traveling. I've done all these international marathons, that at least, so I'm, sort of streamlining things. I like Winston Churchill. I like the Winston Churchill Society. I was able to get to his place last month in Chartwell in the UK. I saw a hotel in Morocco that he stayed in, and then I saw the war tunnels in Gibraltar, where he and Roosevelt planned Project Torch. So so you kind of combine stuff, I guess. If I knew anything, which I don't, just give you an example.
No, I love that. And I think it goes from what I'm listening, like those are all things that you've just really valued, right? And that are important to you, and you just make it happen. And I'm sure too, like from what I've seen, when I've been with you, I think you're pretty organized too with your calendar and, things like that. But I think it's just so important to you that it's like a non-negotiable, right? And that's what it kind of sounds like on my end. So that's awesome. And I have a fun question here for you that I think, myself, our family, anyone tuning in, that might be curious to hear about this. If you could go back, give your 18-year-old self, one piece of advice, what would it be?
Oh boy, I don't know. That guy he was a bit of a goof. I don't think he'd listen to me, but if he did, I would just say, sober up. No, I would say dream big. That's important. Be uncomfortable in the big dreams, because it's so rewarding. And again, I'll come back to good things. Most good things that happen in life are a result of hard work, and I think I lived that, but a lot of the time I would leave it to the last minute, and it would be stressful, hard work to get to where if I was a little more, well, to your point, organized and a little more of an adult at age 18 and onwards, I could have done a better job.
Awesome. Well, I think those are some good points. And, my next question that I'm really curious about is, everyone has had in their life, someone that's had an impact on them, like a mentor, right? And whether that was in football for you when you were an athlete, or whether that was later on, as a runner, someone that you met through the running community, or even through business. I guess my question to you is, you've done a lot of really cool things, but who are your greatest mentors? And are there any memorable stories that you would like to share with my listeners?
Yeah, I mean, business is tough. It can be hard. And I know when I was at Labatt, we had a lot of downsizing, right sizing kind of, we used to call them circular farming squads, where it's like, oh, we got to get rid of 25 people to hit our EBITDA number for this year, or whatever, 25% of our people. But when, as a result of one of our last downsizings, where at one point at Labatt, I think we had 25 regional and national brand managers and brand directors. And we came out of downsizing where I think 17 of them were let go. And there was sort of 7 of us that were running the business nationally instead of regionally. And I remember that first 6 months was tough. We had a big sales meeting down in Florida, where we had the whole company, and I had to give a presentation. That was difficult in front of 500 people, and you're kind of a young brand manager trying to pretend you know what the hell's going on. But I had a boss at the time who, in that first 6 months, was not really convinced I was on the A team. And I just remember Canadians that are tuning in here, I'll use an analogy. In my career, it was what I'll call a TSN turning point, like a point in the game where things changed. And it was a Friday afternoon meeting with my boss. I had a whole bunch of, brands in my portfolio and a couple of brand managers working for me. And we had a meeting, and it was just like file for everything, had everything nailed and figured it all out. And this gentleman who's a good friend of mine to this day, David Kincaid, he was so excited that he basically said, "Take your wife out for dinner. Like, this is great. You're on the team." And I thought, oh my God, I'm on the team. Because up until then, it was a pretty scary 6 months in the national office in First Canadian Place in downtown Toronto, and having 3 little kids, and every meeting the gun was on the table. And I felt like I'd kind of arrived that day. So I did take Jane out for dinner. So
Nice.
we had to get a babysitter. But anyway.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's crazy how those
different kind of mentor though, Ben, I think that you were thinking. And after that, he became a full-blown mentor and, as I say, a great friend.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, no, it's huge, eh? In moments like that, where whether there's a new challenge that we're taking on or a new experience, how again that one conversation or that one little remark, how it could have impact, right? So I'm glad that you were able to look back at that and share that story. Appreciate it. And so
I didn't get fired anyway.
No, not at all. And so Rick, a question that I want to move to, as the purpose of this podcast is really to inspire millions of people, to achieve greatness and enhance their overall personal well-being. So I'm curious to ask you, what is your definition of greatness?
See, that is a big question. That is a question that is, I think people have been looking for thousands of years. But I would say interesting, and it's maybe just in the last few years that I've realized that this can be a differentiator in terms of greatness. And it's something, and it was a book I read by Angela Duckworth a few years back. It's called Grit. And grit is the power of passion and perseverance. And I think those two things in life are critical. They're almost massive cost of entry to kind of the gateway to greatness. Because if you don't have them, you're never gonna have that mantle of greatness. But I'll also say that in sort of travel terms, I was telling you that, like, forward thinking, I think you got to be always thinking about the future. You can't live in the past. And even if you're my age, as a former CEO, but founding partner, so on, you still have to be forward thinking. And that's why I say, when people ask me about my favorite country, I would say it's the next one. So forward thinking, grit. And the last two things I would say, and again, I'll tie it back to travel, but it works for businesses, is being respectful and curious. And there's a really cool little credo that I don't know where I picked it up somewhere, but it goes sort of like this. There's always room in your suitcase for respect and curiosity if you're going to be a really good traveler. There's always room in your suitcase for respect and curiosity. So as far as like the way you approach business, the way you approach, in this case, travel, it kind of works. Respect, treat people as you expect to be treated. Being curious in life, I think, is just so. I like a lot of people. You kind of want to learn new things every day, and so that would be a few pieces of the puzzle, Ben, maybe that might tie back to the theme of your amazing podcast.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's a beautiful definition. And I really enjoyed, that perspective, of talking about grit and passion and perseverance, as well as, having that curiosity and kind of respect, and I think that ties into being humble and kind of ambitious, right? To keep growing, right? So I really, really appreciate hearing that. and also hearing your perspective. So thank you for sharing. And that being said, Rick, you've tuned into my show as a guest. You've also now been on the show. Who is a future guest? Someone that you personally know that you think would be a great fit for this show.
Well, interestingly enough, I would say the founding partner of Level 5, which is a consulting company boutique consulting company that does work with competitors like KPMG, Boston Consulting Group. These guys are premium boutique management consulting company, Level 5, and the founding partner is David Kincaid, who was my boss at Labatt. So he has written several books. He's a renowned marketer. He's in the Canadian Marketing Hall of Fame, and I'll twist his arm.
That's awesome. Well, don't twist it too hard, because he also needs to be able to show up to the show.
Yeah.
But I appreciate that name, and I'm really curious, to dig a little deeper there, and also invite him to be on the show. So I really appreciate that. Thank you. And so Rick, what is the best way for any of my listeners, if they want to look up the Hive, or if they want to connect with you in some type of way, where's the best place to go?
Yeah, I mean, the simple ones are the hiveinc.com is our Hive website. I'm a LinkedIn guy, so easy. Rick Shaver on LinkedIn is likely easy to find. Traveler Century Club, you can just Google Traveler Century Club and that'll come up. And I run the Canadian chapter of that, and so there's some fun stuff on there if people are listening that are travelers and want to actually say, well, I've been to a lot of countries. Well, how many would that be? Well, you can actually go on and find out how many countries you've been to, or even Strava. I'm a Strava guy with all the running stuff, but that's about it. I'm out there.
That's awesome, Rick. Well, in that case, they would have to give you kudos, right? So if people aren't familiar on Strava, kudos is almost like a props or a high five, just saying good job on your run, right?
Yeah, it's good. It's like a running diary, really, and just endurance sports. There's a lot of cyclists on there, and
yeah,
so
awesome, Rick. Well, you know what? I want to take this last moment. You've been very generous with your time today. Thank you for being here. It was so fun, to hang out with my uncle, hear more stories about him, but also unpacked. You truly are an amazing person. So also, to share that with others, who don't know you. So thanks again for being here today.
Well, it's great. Thank you, Ben, and keep up the great work with your podcast. And it's all for a really greater good, what you're doing. So congratulations.
Thank you so much. Means a lot. Thanks.
Yeah.